Hey everyone, welcome back to Dev Parkour. In this video, I'm going to show how you can create a kind of an embeddable JavaScript snippet, kind of the way that Google Analytics works, also the way that a lot of, it's kind of like a general plugin to an HTML site. So this is common for surveys, embedding surveys. Basically, there's a little bit of JavaScript that you pull into your page, and then you tell it where to populate that your page with in this case it's going to be a contact form. So I'm actually building on top of the contact form app that I've built. I think last week or the week before. I built it as a simple PHP app. Then I built a React version, and now I'm turning it into a little JavaScript snippet that I can include on other sites. So let's get into the code. All right, so what we have here is a little contact form application that I've built using PHP on the Pales framework. And you can see it's got one controller that's got a couple different actions. And this is basically what it shows. It shows 3 fields, a submit button, and I made 2 different versions of this, one just in PHP and one in React. We'll see that a little bit later. But for right now, since we're going to inject this as a JavaScript kind of plugin sort of thing into an HTML page, we need, first the JavaScript file that we're going to be injecting. And so we'll just call it contactform.js. I'm not going to mess with Babel or transpilation or anything crazy like that. We're just going to write the simple JavaScript in one file. And we'll also need a demo HTML page for this to live in. Basically, this will represent on a third-party site that's just using this contact form. This is an HTML page that will include the JavaScript that we're writing in this video. All right, so to test out this linkage, let's first add a little bit of code to our HTML page just to make sure that we're including the JavaScript file. And because we're kind of mocking out the scenario where where this page is running in one place and then the contact form app is running in on another server somewhere, we actually do need to provide the whole URL. So in this case, my contact form app is running on localhost port 8000, and we'll need this URL. So localhost :8000 /contactform.js. And just to make sure that it's loading, we'll put a little document.write into the script that just writes some stuff to the screen. And let's see what happens. So because I want to run this as if it's running on its own machine, I'm actually going to use a feature in Visual Studio Code called Reveal in Explorer. And this actually shows from the Windows side how to access the file on WSL. So this is just running as an HTML page, just opening an HTML page from the disk without any web server or anything like that. And you can see the little message that I put in the document.write call is showing up. It's saying loaded script. And you can see my demo HTML page is running from disk. Everything else is running from localhost 8000. And you saw the breakpoint just hit. That's because it's hitting the document.write that it's loading from the PHP app, which is really just we're not using the PHP app much at all right now. It's just that JavaScript file. So now let's kind of think about how we want to actually use this JavaScript file. So presumably this JavaScript file would load some script that's useful to us. And then from there, we could maybe call a function that loads our contact form. So let's say maybe contact form.load. And we probably want to specify what contact form we're using. So in this case, we provided a slug, It's called demo. The contact form that we're using is the demo contact form. And obviously, not a whole lot has changed. I think I actually forgot to save the file there. Nope, I did. You can see it's yelling at us because there is no contact form and there is no load method. So let's create that. As I was writing this, I went back and forth on a couple different ways to do that, ultimately settling on, well, not this one. So ultimately, I settled on this approach to implementing the contact form. I figured just save an object to window.contactForm. All it's going to have is a load method. Obviously, that's a function. First thing we're going to do is fetch the JSON that defines this contact form from the PHP app. And again, because this script will be loaded onto a third-party website, we need to have the full path to where the PHP app is running. Obviously, we would change this for a production scenario. Now, at this point, I actually forgot what the route was to get to the JSON for the contact form. So I went over to the React app that I built in a couple videos back and grabbed that URL. So it turns out that it's just /JSON, not /with_JSON. The method in the PHP controller is called with_JSON, but the route is just JSON. Now here we can actually use async await because we're not in a React hook. There is a way to use async await in hooks, but for that video I just bypassed all that together. But here we're awaiting just so that the code's a little bit cleaner. And let's see what we get. So we'll just document.write, create a little template. And paste in basically what we have from the PHP. Now, of course, we will have to replace all of the PHP echo pieces with template interpolation. There'll be JSON.nameLabel. And that's essentially it. Let's flip over to a web browser and test it out. So it turns out that I actually had an error. My first error was that I had await operators in a method that wasn't marked as async. So let's go ahead and fix that. And now we load this up in a browser. And we still have an error, and the error is that I actually forgot the JSON dot at the beginning of name placeholder on line 11 here. So once we have that in place, we get what we were expecting. We get the template, we get it populated with the information from that JSON response. Now, the next thing that we want to do is document.write isn't really the best way to accomplish this because, well, it's just not. There are lots of problems with document.write. What I really want to do is create a form element and then inject that into the DOM. That's a much safer, much more kind of idiomatic, modern approach to doing things that doesn't have the problems with that document.write does. So what I do is I create a form element, and then I define its inner HTML because I'm lazy. I don't want to do document.createElement for everything inside of it. And then, well, you can see right now I'm document.writing the outer HTML. That'll actually come back to bite us in a little bit. But you can see it still works. It still accomplishes the same thing. I'm still building a form. I'm still populating it with all the divs. The one thing that I'm not doing is setting up the form correctly. So we'll actually have to do that in just a minute. It's just a form element with some inner content. That's all it is right now. So at this point, I'm trying to think of how I can load the contact form at document load time when the DOM is ready. And it turns out that I missed something here. It wasn't working quite right. Realistically, I don't want to be using document.write at all, but for purposes of this video, I tried a couple options, tried a few things. It wasn't quite working. It ended up document.write, probably the best thing for this video right now. Off camera, I'll fix this so that it actually loads properly. And in the end, I just gave up and went back to what I had before, document.write form.outerHTML. And it works. Remember how I said that wasn't the right way to do it? Yeah, it still isn't the right way to do it, but we'll leave it that way just for now. So next up, we need to provide some way to submit this form. So the first thing I thought to do was form, add event listener, listen for the submit event, and then just call a function. Just do a fetch, kind of like I did on the React version of this app. Fetch, and it'll post basically a form data object, and then wait for the response to come back. So first up, I wanted to replace all this nested .then stuff with some await operators. Of course, we have no set submitted. That was an artifact from the React side. So for now, we'll just log the response that we get. Now next, we need to figure out some way of getting access to the values in this form. Now, my first thought was get the event, get the target from the event, which should be the form object, and then try to find the elements in the form, do query selector, that sort of thing. But it turns out there's actually a better way to do that. Now remember, I'm using a form here, and I'm listening for the submit event on the form, which means I already have the form, which itself is a form data. So for body, I can just use event.target. And of course, I forgot that I need to put all this in an async method, or an async function. So let's fix that. And we get our form to show up. And now we should be able to type some stuff into the form and click submit and see what happens. Well, as you might imagine, nothing happens right on the first try. I, in my haste, didn't do prevent default. So in addition to automatically submitting the form when I clicked the button, it also fired my event handler. Well, it fired my event handler and also submitted the form, which is not what I wanted it to have happen, because I think submitting the form actually happened first, so my event handler really didn't, the browser never fired that either. So next time around, I figured, you know what, let's just set a breakpoint, click send, and it's still submitted. Now, see if you can spot what the issue was here. It's something very subtle, and what's going on actually took me a few minutes to figure out. Maybe not minutes. The video's sped up, so you can see there's no event handlers listed there. And the reason there are no event listeners listed there is because of the way I'm injecting this into the DOM. event listeners are not part of the HTML. They're not part of inner HTML. They're not part of outer HTML. Because I'm document.write form.outer HTML, that's how I'm doing this. That add event listener that I spent lines 24 through 32 writing, yeah, that's not part of the DOM anymore as soon as I add that. So instead, I decided to kind of do something that also probably isn't the right way to do this. Just grab the body, and then append the form as a child. You know how I said that I was going to append this to the DOM the right way off camera? Yeah, well, it still isn't the right way. This second way that I'm doing it still is not the full right way to do it. It's closer, but it's not the right way to do it. Now, you can see my event lister actually fires. And if we step over, we'll do the fetch. We get a response back. And when we log, you'll see I was a little surprised at what I ended up getting. The value that I got back was the exact same value that I got in order to populate the form template, showing the email label, email placeholder, message label, message placeholder, all the placeholders and all the labels for all the form fields. And it turned out that what had happened was I hadn't actually implemented the posts side of things, even for the React app. Not really sure what I was thinking there. But you can see here I'm looking through the request, the response, making sure that the post request is in fact a post request. And ultimately I have to go to the controller, and I see that I just have a single with JSON method. The only thing that it does is always returns the contact form object. This is all despite the fact that in the routes, I very specifically have a post route for ID/JSON, and I'm setting this same action as what should happen when a post request comes in, expecting some JSON. But what I really want to have happen is essentially this post contact form method. So let's see if we can integrate post contact form into with JSON. The first thing I thought about doing was just adding an if statement in here, but that presented a few challenges. One, there was going to be some duplicate code anyway, and two, it really felt kind of dirty. I already have this routes construct, so why not just have the post route to a different method? There's going to be some overlap, but not any copying and pasting that I can't live with. In fact, it's going to have more in common with post content form than it is with JSON. So with that, I just copied most of post content form except for the final this.view, because I actually want to use JSON. Created some reasonable error responses, and now for the JSON response, the success response, I thought a little bit about what I wanted to do here. I decided that I'd create an object with two keys, one a status key indicating success, and then another being a message key with the successfully this email has been successfully sent message. Initially I thought about hard coding it, but then I realized that our form object, our form model, has a message specifically for this, and I had some trouble remembering the name. Received message, that's what the name is. And then with that, I tried sending a message again, stepped through, and saw what my response was. And it turns out that CORS had reared its ugly head again, not because I didn't have a course header, but because I actually had an error in my PHP, I was using a variable that didn't exist. Once I replaced that variable with the proper variable name, everything worked just fine. I got my message back, status success, message, your message has been sent. Now with that, we could do a little bit more on the front end. So if the status was success, then we can provide some sort of response on the screen. So in this case, what I decided to do was basically just append it to the DOM. Nothing super fancy. There you go. The little message shows up underneath the form when the message is finally sent. So while I was editing this video the other night, I realized that I was actually trying to be way too fancy with things. So in this part of the video, I want to show the right way to do what I was trying to do and inject this form into the DOM. Since realistically, that's probably what you came to this video for. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to change how this works. We are going to do something along these lines, and we are going to append the form to the element. But what we're actually going to do is we'll take the parent as a parameter to this function. Then we'll just do parent element dot append child. So we'll append the form within the a provided parent element, which means that what we need to do when we create this is, here's our demo HTML, we'll need to provide something here. And what we'll actually provide is, for our purposes, it could just be a div. Let's say div. We'll give it an ID of contact form. Just an empty div, nothing fancy. And then we can do document.getElement by ID. It can be getElement by ID, it can be .query selector, it doesn't really matter. Since we have an ID there, let's just use getElement by ID. Let's say contact form. And I'll save the page. I'm using Prettier, so things might jump around a little bit and change my formatting. And then let's go over to the demo contact form and refresh. And it looks like I think my machine rebooted actually, so this isn't running anymore. This the contact form app. So let's make sure that's running. It is. Let's try that again. Okay, so we refresh, and there we go. We get our contact form. If we look at the source of this page, or actually elements, we can see, did I forget to save things? This is still working the way it used to. I did forget to save things. So let's save that. Let's try this again. So if we refresh, now we'll see we have a div with an ID of contact form. You may have seen it highlight when the contact form actually loaded, but you can see that the form that we've created is now inside of that contact form. And if we send in this contact form, once it sends, you'll see your message has been sent, and it's inside of the form, exactly the way it worked before when we were just appending this to the DOM. or using document.write. But the advantage to what we're doing now is, well, one of many advantages is that in our demo page, we can have a bunch of HTML. Let's give it an H1 and say this is my contact form. And if we refresh, we get the H1, contact form loads, and yeah, that's basically it. But this means that document.write doesn't mess with anything that's already on the page. We don't have to worry about anything like that. We just know that we have an element that's on the page, and we append the contact form to it. And that's it. Your page can do whatever you want it to do. The only instructions, as are common with this sort of JavaScript embedded script deal, is put the script stuff right before the closing body tag so that the rest of the DOM has already loaded. For instance, we wouldn't have been able to do contact form.load this before this div. So for instance, if I put this div down here, that would not have worked. So put the script tag at the bottom of your page right before the closing body tag, and wherever you want the contact form to go, stick a div in your page, and it will get populated by the contact form. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. Click subscribe and click that notification bell so you'll be notified when other videos come out. I really appreciate that. This channel wouldn't be here if it weren't for all of you wonderful people out there. And if you have any comments, questions, topics for future videos, go ahead and leave a comment down in the comment section below. I really enjoy reading those and responding to everybody who writes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.